Welcome to this explainer. Today we are taking a truly mind-bending thematic journey. We'll be decoding a profound theological lecture, starting way up high with the absolute, breathtaking perfection of the divine, and then bringing it all the way down to the practical, everyday realities of Islamic unity and jurisprudence. It's a massive shift in scale, right? From the heavens straight down to earth. But the logical thread connecting the two is just, well, it's absolutely fascinating. Let's dive in.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. First, Esma-ul Husna, expression of perfection. 2. The El prefix and absolute perfection. 3. Tajalli, what is divine manifestation? 4. The 4% universe and our limits. 5. Sex and the unity of the Ummah. And finally, Section 6, jurisprudence, truth against slander.
Section 1. Esmâu'l Husna, expression of perfection.
Okay, so diving into this first core concept, the speaker makes this really compelling argument that the beautiful names of God, the Esma-ul Husna, they aren't just static identifiers or simple labels. They're actually active expressions of ultimate perfection. To help us grasp this, he uses a fantastic metaphor of a vehicle. Imagine you're standing under a towering 14-meter-tall palm tree. You really want the fruit at the very top, but obviously you can't jump quite that high. Well, the divine names act like a rope dropped from the very top of that tree. By grabbing onto that rope, our limited human understanding can slowly climb upward toward a creator who would otherwise be entirely beyond our reach.
Moving on to Section 2, the El prefix and absolute perfection.
Let's see how this whole concept builds into the actual linguistic structure of Arabic. It turns out a simple, single Arabic prefix unlocks some incredible secrets about God's boundless nature. Notice the linguistic contrast here between the indefinite word alimun and the definite el-alim. When you say alimun, you're just talking about someone knowing a specific subject, like a person knowing math or history. But when you attach that el prefix, it completely elevates that knowledge into an absolute, timeless reality. It's no longer just knowing a fact, it becomes boundless, indescribable knowledge.
And this brilliantly illustrates what we actually mean by absolute attributes. Take el-basir, the all-seeing. The speaker builds this terrifyingly deep anatomy of sight to explain it. God doesn't just see you performing an action. He sees the underlying logic behind exactly why you did it. He knows the completely hidden emotional world driving that logic. He even knows, down to the microscopic level, the exact hormones your body is secreting in that precise moment. And, as the scripture beautifully puts it, he knows the hidden betrayals of the eyes. Think about that. When you look at someone with a hidden motive, even if you manage to fool the entire world, that absolute sight captures the invisible intention. That is the sheer weight of the El prefix.
This brings us to Section 3, Tajalli, what is divine manifestation?
So the absolutely crucial question here is, how does this absolute perfection interact with our physical, very imperfect universe, right? If God is completely boundless, how do his attributes exist here? Well, the speaker tackles this by defining a concept called tajalli, or divine manifestation. It acts almost like a reflection on a highly polished mirror. God's attributes manifest in the universe, but his physical essence doesn't literally mix into the material world. It's a reflection of qualities, not a literal division of his being.
To make this highly complex Neoplatonic metaphysics a bit more accessible, the speaker asks a really clarifying question. Imagine you're blowing on a dying ember to ignite a campfire. Does a physical piece of you actually pass into the fire? No, of course not. Your breath sparks the reaction, right? It brings the fire to life, but your physical essence remains completely separate from the flames. And that is exactly how we're meant to understand the divine breath in creation.
Okay, Section 4, the 4% universe and our limits.
Now, if understanding the exact mechanics of the divine breath seems impossible to fully wrap your head around, don't worry, you definitely aren't alone. The speaker immediately pivots to a striking scientific fact to really humble our perspective. Think about all the billions of stars, the sprawling galaxies, the nebulas, the supermassive black holes that we can observe with our most powerful telescopes. Actually, let's put it in perspective. Everything we have ever seen makes up only 4% of the universe. A staggering 96% is completely unknown cosmic void. The speaker's point here is just so powerful. If our human minds are fundamentally too limited to grasp 96% of the physical space we actually live in, how on earth can we possibly expect to fully dissect the complex mechanics of the human soul, let alone the nature of God? We simply have to accept our intellectual boundaries.
Which brings us to Section 5, sex and the unity of the Ummah.
This profound sense of cosmic humility seamlessly bridges us over to human society.
If we know so little about the universe, why are we so arrogant with one another? This perfectly sets the stage for how the speaker addresses audience questions regarding sectarian unity. He argues very passionately that what he calls sectarian hooliganism completely destroys the core values of the faith. He asserts that whether someone is Sunni or Shia, the community is ultimately bound together by a shared direction of prayer, a shared book, and a shared prophet. The differences? Well, they're simply in the details, and magnifying those minor details into literal wars is complete tragedy.
To back this up, he outlines some historical realities that honestly get forgotten a lot. Towering, highly respected figures in Islamic jurisprudence historically held vastly different and sometimes highly controversial rulings. For example, Abu Hanifa had differing views on the limits of certain beverages. Imam Shafi had what some consider extreme edge case views on marriage. Imam Tabari had different views on the specifics of physical ablution. The speaker uses this to show that diversity of thought isn't a new problem, it's historically completely normal. And weaponizing these differences to excommunicate people, that goes against the very tradition of the faith.
All right, Section 6, Jurisprudence, Truth Against Slander. This historical context perfectly sets up our final section. Here, the speaker objectively addresses some severe contemporary criticisms regarding his own fatwas. Addressing politically and socially charged accusations regarding his rulings on women's menstruation, he impartially clarifies his stance. He explains the strict jurisprudential logic at play. Because ritual ablution is a firm requirement for daily prayer, women are exempt during this time. However, ablution is not a requirement for fasting. Fasting is simply a matter of physical endurance. Therefore, his ruling is that while they are certainly exempt from prayer, women may choose to endure the fast if they feel physically well enough to do so. It's a distinction based purely on the technical requirements of the rituals, nothing else.
He concludes his defense against these intense sectarian attacks with a breathtaking visual metaphor. Mount Erciyes is this massive, towering volcano in Turkey. He reminds his listeners that the shared faith they hold is exactly like this immovable, immense mountain. Meanwhile, our human errors, our minor disagreements, and our differing rulings, they're just tiny, insignificant pebbles scattered on the ground.
Which leaves us with this incredibly provocative final thought. In a universe that we just learned is 96% entirely unknown to us, are we really going to let minor disagreements, the mere pebbles of our existence, destroy the grand unity and the towering mountain of our shared understanding? It's a hugely powerful question to reflect on, brilliantly bridging the vastness of the cosmos right down to how we treat the person standing right next to us. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope it leaves you as fascinated as I am.